Jenny Barry. I work at BooksPlus in Bathurst, and I'm also one of the co-organisers of the Bathurst Writers and Readers Festival, along with the wonderful Kylie Sheed and Heidi Anand at the Bathurst Memorial Entertainment Centre. And I'm really, really pleased to be here to co-present a session about some of the great books that you might have missed in the past year with my very good buddy and reader extraordinaire, Cade Turner-Mann. So, hey, Cade, how you going?
Hi, Jen. How are you? Yes, I'm Cade. I'm a reader. Not much else.
I beg to differ.
Yeah, just before we start, we're going to just acknowledge the people of the Wiradjuri Nation on whose land we live and work, and extend that respect to all their elders, past, present, and emerging, and also on to the Indigenous peoples of the nations on for anyone who's watching this as well. So yeah, we'd just like to extend that respect.
Thank you so much. And while this is a session about some of the great books you might have missed, both Cade and I acknowledge that there's plenty of books that we've missed reading in the past year.
Hundreds upon hundreds.
The piles are still there waiting to be read. So yeah. Maybe next year we'll come back with a few extra ones that we missed this year.
I mean, it's possible. I've been stuck in here reading pretty much all the time at the moment, so...
One of the great pleasures of being in isolation, hey?
Oh, you'd think so, but like it's gotten to the point, I think, where reading has become more of a chore. So
oh,
I've read so many.
So maybe talking about them for a little while might be good. It'll get you back in the groove.
Oh, maybe. We'll see.
Well, there's also been a lot of popular books that we know that everybody, our fabulous readers, and supporters of the festival have read that, we won't mention because, you've all read them and loved them as much as we have. But we're going to kick off with some Australian fiction. As far as possible, we're going to talk as much about Australian books as we can, even though there's some terrific international books that we'll be chatting about as well. But I'm just going to give a big plug straight off to the Great Festival Read book this year, which is the wonderful Tara June Winch novel, The Yield. And the Great Festival Read panel will be chatting about this on Sunday. So don't miss that. It's a wonderful panel. And also we'll be hearing from Tara June as well, which we are very grateful for her. But truly, if you haven't read this book yet, please do read it. Yeah. It's set in Wiradjuri country. Do you want to say some things about it, Cade?
You know what? I am yet to read it. I've got a copy here, and just so everyone knows, we are pre-recording this, so I may get a chance to read it before the Great Festival Read starts.
The festival, great, yes. Yeah.
So I have nothing to say on this one yet, as I'm pretty sure I don't with most of the books that you've got in store.
And vice versa, but I know this one's just got into your hands, so
yes, yeah, I'm yet to have a good read of it. But it from everything that I've read and everything that I've looked at, it sounds like an incredible piece.
It surely is, yeah, very special.
Yes.
So I'm going to kick off with a newish book that's just been released called The Animals in This Country by Laura Jean Mackay, which has been published by Scribe Publications in Melbourne. And this is a debut novel, even though Laura has written one other work. And look, it's one of the most unique books I've read recently. She has a really original voice on the page, and this story is highly original. It's set in an outback wildlife park, and it focuses on the character of Jean, who is a middle-aged woman. She's great. She's really gutsy. She's tough. She's had a really pretty rough life. She likes a nice drop, and her daughter-in-law is the manager of the wildlife park, and so she looks after her granddaughter as well as also caring for the dingoes in the dingo enclosure. And this is a really, really prescient novel because the main theme of the novel is there's a pandemic. And who would have thought, you know, that this was going to come out at the time that we're enduring a pandemic. And what that means is that people can understand the language of animals, of the Australian wildlife. And so it's a real roller coaster ride. It ends up being a road trip book where Jean has to go on the road with Sue the dingo to try and track down her granddaughter. And I'm not going to say much more, but it's a cracker of a book. I really, really loved it.
Ever since that one got announced, it's been on my to-read list. So, yeah, I'm glad that you're giving it such a big rap.
Well, hopefully it's coming your way soon too, bro.
Oh, okay. Sweet. I'm looking forward to that. Would you equate it with anything else that's around at the moment, or is it in its own ballpark?
It's really in its own ballpark, I feel. Like, I know that there's been, you know, interestingly, quite a bit of, you know, plague style, pandemic, you know, novels. But yeah, this is so original, especially because it's got such a great Australian setting, and also, you know, the whole focus on you know, native wildlife. And so it really does confront the way you think about Australian wildlife. And cool. And also it's great just to have a middle-aged, rough around the edges character like Jean. You don't get to see them very often, and I love her. She's a ripper. And I love Sue the dingo. She's fabulous.
Bloody ripper, mate. Oh, awesome. Well, I guess it's my turn.
It is.
It is. I am going to kick off with From Here On Monsters by Elizabeth Breyer. And this came out from Picador, strangely enough. So From Here On Monsters, it's a mystery-esque thriller with, I don't know how you describe it, like elements of like noir and like that sort of seedy underbelly of society going on. So it basically follows a antiquarian bookseller who's also a book evaluator, and she gets onto this piece which is supposedly showing the early influence of the Spanish on Australia, and it's all bound in kangaroo leather, I believe, from memory, and it's got palm fronds, but it's actually a big codex, which is all written in Old Spanish. So that's happening at the same time as she's also working for a conceptual artist who's trying to do a piece for the Australian government about taking emotion out of language. So it's a strange book, and I think that if anyone enjoyed Sean Prescott's The Town from a few years back, or even the recently reissued Yoko Ogawa Memory Police, that's sort of in that same vein, or like the darker end of Murakami. Sort of like that Dance, Dance, Dance. I don't want to spoil it too much because there's so much which happens in that novel. But yeah, that was, I think, very widely overlooked this year. From my point of view, it was one of those books which probably should have been up for the Stella, but I don't know, just seemed to get forgotten about in the end. Yeah, that was my first one. Yeah.
Well, thanks for bringing that to everyone's attention. I actually haven't read it either. It's in the pile, but it's but it had such great raps.
Yeah, it got very good reviews, and I don't know whether it's because it came out on Picador. It has the feeling of a book which maybe should have come out on like Brow Books or Text or something like that.
Picador are doing some really interesting stuff though.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they definitely are. Yeah, it had that more of like a small publisher feel. Yeah, it was a bit strange that it did get overlooked so badly.
Well, hopefully you've just put it in a lot of readers' hands.
With any luck.
Well, the other novel I wanted to talk about, which I don't have a copy in front of me, I'm sorry, is Sophie Hardcastle's book, Below Deck, which is a debut novel, even though Sophie is a really accomplished writer. She's written a memoir and also a YA novel. And this is published by Allen and Unwin. It was a lead fiction title for them for the first half of the year. And it's a book that has... is primarily about consent and the variations of consent and how, women navigate that in society. And it's a confronting book, and but at the same time, it's so beautifully written that it takes you on a journey that is just really compelling to read. Its narrator is a young woman in her 20s, Ollie, and she's finished university and comes from quite a wealthy family, and they very much want her to go down a sort of conventional career track, and she doesn't want to. And she's in a relationship with another guy that's deeply unsatisfactory and quite emotionally abusive, and she ends up, she has a great love of the ocean, and she ends up finding her tribe, I guess, with an older couple. An older man and woman who live on a yacht, and they're taking off to the ocean, and Ollie makes a choice to go with them. And it's where Ollie really finds herself and is mentored. It's, in this book there's beautiful themes of women's friendship and also friendship with this older male character, this sea salty, lovely man. And then the story moves a few years later, and Ollie's sort of having to take a passage from the Pacific Island across to New Zealand with a group of men on the boat. And, a dreadful incident happens on that voyage. And that trauma really spins Ollie into, a dark place. And then the novel moves from there to London, and it's set in the art scene in London, and Ollie's working in a really funky gallery, working a lot with women's art, and in a good relationship with a lovely guy, and as happens, she's forced to confront that past and that incident, and that takes her on another journey. And this book ranges across, from Australia to London to the Antarctic, and the writing about the ocean is just stunning, and the natural world, and also about healing and the impact of trauma and the power, as I said, of women's friendship. And I just think it's such a really important novel. I know, there was a lot of, connection to the Me Too movement, and, that's really important. But as a book in its own right, it's really beautifully paced and written, and the descriptive language is lovely. And it's a really terrific book.
Oh, that sounds incredible. Again, another one I haven't read.
We're doing that this year. Normally we've read so much stuff in common, but
I know.
It's good, actually.
It feels very much like we've taken our own separate paths.
We have.
Well, I'm out of Australian novel fiction, but I do have some short stories to talk about, if we're up to that yet.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, I don't have my copy here because I lent it to my friends who are now down in Tasmania, but it is Wayne Marshall's Shirl, and it's out through a firm, I believe, from memory.
Yes.
Look, this is a funny collection of short stories, a debut as well, I believe. Really just taking the piss out of that Australian macho masculine culture. And I mean, it's satire, but satire done very well, where it's a lot more funny than it is cynical, I think. But still, obviously, with some very important points to make. But there's some absolutely classic stories in here of a Yowie coming down out of the mountains to go do a desperate and dateless ball in a country town, and he rides the local bowling club's Curdo into the desperate and dateless ball. That one's very good. There's another story where a bloke goes around to his mate's place because he's got a new missus. And when he arrives, he finds out that the new missus is a kangaroo dressed in a Carlton Guernsey. And they sit around drinking beer and watching the football while the new missus kangaroo is cuddling up to his mate on the couch. Yeah, it's a very strange little collection, but I thought was very good. And certainly got a few good raps from a lot of people who've read it so far. So. Yeah, that's my suggestion. Oh yeah, and if you're into that sort of short story stuff, it's probably in that vein of like Julie Coe and that's that sort of satire. So yeah, that's my selection.
Well, I was going to suggest sort of, I guess, the other continuum on the short story collection. And there's been so much, so many short story collections published, which is really wonderful, Australian short story collections. I mean, one that I read last year was Alice Bishop's Constant Hum.
Oh, that was fantastic.
So good, isn't it?
That's an incredible collection.
Yeah. They're set after the Black Saturday fires in Victoria, and Alice is a Victorian writer. It's a debut short story collection, isn't it? Published.
Yes.
Yeah, published by Text. And Alice and her family were also experienced the fires, and these stories, they range across characters and times, events straight after, in the immediacy after the fires, and also much further down the track. And they're very moving and poignant, but they're quite, a lot of them are quite short pieces, aren't they? And
some a page or two at most, like very condensed little vignettes, really. Some of them at least.
Yeah, and just so powerful on the page, aren't they?
Oh, incredible. And I probably poorly made the decision to read it during our recent horrific run, but it probably only made it all the more moving. Yeah,
they are. They're incredibly powerful, but she's really someone to watch, isn't she?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
So moving along, I'm just going to bang on about a couple of recipe books, and interestingly, I'm talking about them while my buddy across there, who is a wonderful chef himself, really, I feel like I should
no
pass
longer a chef, but
a former chef. But I really feel like I should be passing them through the phone to him. But
you don't want me to get my hands on them.
But I know he appreciates food so hugely. So together, I'm just going to give a plug to a wonderful local book, A Basket by the Door, by Sophie Hansen, which is published by Murdoch Books last year. And this is a really gorgeous collection. Sophie is based in Orange, and she has a really great blog and website. Local is Lovely. She's a real champion of local producers and local food, and this book, it was born out of her love of taking food and food related gifts to people at, you know, at times when they most need it. So, you know, if they're coming home from hospital after having a baby, or after the death of a loved one, or through drought, whatever. And this is her thing. And look, it's beautifully produced book by Murdoch, and just lovely fail-safe recipes. Like, they just never fail, and gorgeous things. I can highly recommend her wholemeal apple and marmalade cake. And the great thing about it is you can intersperse any fruit, any jam in it, and a lot of her recipes are like that. And yeah, it's a beautiful book. And so just wanted to give it a plug. And one that I don't have with me is another book, Shared Table, which was published by Smith Street Books, and it's a vegetarian, vegan-friendly feast to share with family and friends. So it's a gorgeous book written by Claire Scrine, and interestingly, Claire is from Brisbane, and she used to work as a caterer and short order cook put herself through uni, and has always lived in share houses, and so she decided to self-publish the cookbook initially. And then after about a year, it got picked up by Smith Street Press, and they did a beautiful version last year, really sort of large format, gorgeous matte paper edition, which, you know, sold out its print run and is being printed, coming out again in June. But really gorgeous, big share platter food, and just really fresh, lovely, and all about very affordable, because her thing is about, you know, living on a budget, and just a great book for any food lover.
Have you been doing much cooking while you've been out there isolating?
I had a little bash, a few weeks ago. Got right into it, you know, heavily into the luxes and risottos for a while. How about you?
Oh yeah, slowly but surely. But I'm making my own sourdough, like I feel everyone's doing. Pickling my own cucumbers and all of the rest. But, you know, anything to get me from sitting on the couch for 8 hours a day.
It's wonderful, isn't it? How much it, you know, one of the positives is people going back to making their own food. Yeah,
definitely. And, you know, now that the sourdough starter is all ready, I can at least not have to worry about it too much.
Way to go. I'm impressed.
Don't be. Have you got any more cookbooks to tell us?
No, that's my 2 cookbooks.
Okay.
So
where are we going from here?
We're going to go across to international fiction now.
Do you want to start us off, or do you want me to?
I'm happy to kick us off, and then everyone can have a rest from me for a little while then.
Okay.
I'm going to kick off with one of my favourite books from last year, The Disappearing Earth by Julia Phillips, which was published by Simon & Schuster. And I love this book. When I pulled it out of the pile to talk about it, it made me want to read it again straight away. It's set on the Kamacha Peninsula in northeastern Russia, and ostensibly it was billed as a crime novel, like you know, a thriller, and like it, you know, its premise is that 2 young girls go missing at the beginning of the book, but to me it's so much more than that. It's really just a perfectly crafted debut literary novel. Like, I just can't believe that it's her first book, and it is told from 4 perspectives, and in response to the crime, and it is really looking at the Kamacha area and the changes that have come through and been wrought since the breakup of the USSR. So it tells it from the Indigenous people's perspective, how a lot of the young people are having to move to the city for education, and how that means that there aren't the young people there to take on the mantle of the culture, and so the, you know, the slow dying out of of traditions, and as well, it's told from the Russian people's perspective who moved into the peninsula after the breakup of the USSR, and their tensions that they perceive by now in this globalized world, foreign workers coming in and taking a lot of work from local people. So they're sort of underlying themes, but they underpin the whole changing nature and what that means. So for these young girls to go missing, it's looking at the position of women there as well. And but the writing is just so beautifully pared back and gorgeously detailed. It's just such a stunningly interesting novel to read. The characters are wonderful. Yeah, I really, really loved it.
Oh, well, you've given it such a good rap, and I still haven't read it. So. I mean, yeah, there's not much I can say. You just keep choosing things I haven't read. So.
Well, vice versa. Now, all of yours I know I haven't read either, so you can tell me about them.
All right. Well, I guess I will go with this novel by Rachel Eve Moulton called Tinfoil Butterfly. It's come out through Farrar Straus Giroux imprint MCD, and it is a creepy mystery horror adjacent maybe novel, where a woman named Emma is hitchhiking her way across America to the Badlands, following some terrible trauma in her past, which you find out more about throughout the book. And I mean, this doesn't give much away, but anyway, she ends up shooting the driver in the leg and leaving him for dead on the road, and going into a old settlement, which seems to be only populated by a young child and their maybe father. And the father or maybe father is a horrible man and has maybe or maybe not killed the mother, and it's a very interesting sort of backwards America, like that backwoods Americana myth. It's got that feeling of like an urban legend gone wrong. But yeah, it's a very interesting novel. It got a huge glow up by Jack Jemk, who wrote The Grip of It a couple of years ago, which was sort of in that same vein of modern horror or literary horror. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed this one. It stuck with me for quite a long while afterwards, just how disturbing it was. Yeah, it's one of those ones where you'll sort of sit down after, and again, not too many horrible things happen, but it's just eats away at you after a while.
Sounds pretty atmospheric.
Yes, definitely. I mean, the whole thing's cloaked in this snowstorm as well, which is covering the Badlands where she is. Yes, I saw this in a bookstore and grabbed it, and cannot have been happier with my choice. And the cover's incredible too. It's got this little eye,
beautiful
eye poking out of some tinfoil.
Oh,
very, very creepy. So I do like a bit of a horror every now and then to keep it interesting.
My niece loves horror. I'm going to have to tell her about that one.
Oh, definitely give that a shot. And Jack Jemp's The Grip of It as well. So
cool.
Yeah, some interesting literary horror.
Yeah.
Tired Stephen King.
It's Great.
And I like Stephen King, but yes, his ideas are very rehashed.
Yeah, that sounds completely original, and like you say, set in the Badlands, like great location.
Yeah, it's definitely up there for a really, I believe, a debut as well with that one. So an interesting little novel. Yeah,
Well, thanks for telling me about it.
that's all right. Maybe you can borrow it. We'll get scared.
Yes,
Get scared out in the boonies.
I have to read it in the daytime. I always remember reading The Road, and like the last, quarter of the book, or like up to that point, I've been reading when I went to bed at night time. In the last quarter, I just could not read. I knew I couldn't read at night time. I had to read it during the day, finish it during the day. I was so creeped.
That was one of those books I read when I was very young too.
What are you saying?
No. I read that book when I was quite young, probably 14-ish, I guess. And that scene with the child.
Oh my goodness! I know, that was it. Yeah.
I was horrified.
Me too.
I had to keep reading it.
Well, from literary horror to the other extreme, I'm just going to give a shout out to The Dutch House by Anne Patchett, which is published by Bloomsbury. And I know a lot of, readers will have read this book, but just in case there's some of you that haven't, a lovely mate who works in publishing, said to me that he thought it was one of the great American novels, and already, which is a big rap, but I think this could lay claim to it. It's a really interior novel, and it's set in the 50s in Pennsylvania, and it's the story of a brother and sister, Denny and Maeve, and with their father, they move into this really modern house, the Dutch House, which is, just completely out of time and keeping with the town and the era. And their mother has left, and you don't know in the early part of the novel why she has left. And then over time, the father is very remote. He's come from a working class background and built up his own business world, and so he's away a lot of the time. So Maeve is really the carer of Danny, along with two women who work in the household, who are lovely characters. And then in time, their father brings another woman to the household, and that unseats Maeve and Danny's position in the household. And then the story jumps forward, and it's told really in retrospect then, where they've grown, and Maeve stays living in the town, and Danny comes home. He becomes a doctor and comes home, and they try to unpack the impact of that situation throughout the years, and then the story has quite a very interesting last third in it. But like I said, it's just a very quietly told interior novel told from their perspective, but just so engrossing, this domestic drama, and just so accessible to read, but really, really beautifully told about the dynamics of human relationships.
Oh wow, that sounds fairly interesting, I'll say.
You're not sure?
Yeah, don't know if it's for me. I don't know anything which describes itself as the great American novel now.
I know, I shouldn't have probably prefaced with that. That was just, a friend saying that. I know. It didn't
deal with American dirt.
Well, she definitely didn't pitch it as that, and the publishers didn't. That was just my friend saying he thought it could,
I might be able to give it a try then. Well, what have I got here? Indelicacy by Amina Kane. This is out through Text Publishing in Australia. and it is a very short, only 120-ish or so pages, novella slash novel of a woman going from a cleaning job in an art gallery to the highs of society when she marries rich, and then sort of stumbling back down again. And it's got a very sort of cold feeling about around the whole thing. Which doesn't sound like a good rap for it, but it's sort of in that vein of that early 20th century, maybe late 19th century, sort of Victorian-esque drama played out, where it is very cold, and there isn't a lot of good relationships between people. It's a lot of that trying to climb the ladder going on. So it's a very, if you can get past that cold feeling, it's like, which will remain there the whole way through it. It's a very interesting, sort of experimental in a way, I guess, novel. The chapters are tiny, so very much just little snapshots into what's happening in this woman's life as she sort of goes from nothing to something. So that's an interesting one, and the cover art is fantastic as well.
It looks beautiful.
I will say it's got the title is written as if it's a little placard in an art gallery stuck to the front of it. So that's a really interesting novel that definitely won't be for everyone, I will say, but if it sounds like the sort of thing you'd be interested in, I'm sure you'll be quite happy to pick it up if you like that sort of stuff.
Has she written other things you've read?
I have not read anything else from her. I believe she has written one other book which has not been published in Australia, from what I can tell. A small publisher in the US, I believe. And this was her first one to be released outside of the USA.
Cool. Well done you finding it.
No, yeah. Well, I came out on text, and I trust text with just about anything they put out.
Yeah.
So.
They're so good, aren't they? Yeah.
There's something interesting.
Yeah.
What have you got for us?
I've got, this is not the final cover, this is a reading copy. But it's
look at Jen gets the advanced reading copies.
Oh, well, that's good, because then you can give it a plug if you like it. So
right, I've got one later as well.
But this is Such a Fun Age by Carly Reid, which has a really funky cover, which you'll see on the end slides, that there's be slides at the end with the images of these books. Sorry, I should have said that at the beginning. But this is a contemporary novel, again, a debut. Carly Reid's a African-American writer, and this novel tells the story of a young 20-something Emira, post-college, who her mates are, making their way in the world, and she's expected to do the same. And her main job is still as a babysitter, though, and she feels the sort of sting of maybe not having real work or something, even though we know that babysitting, caring for children in any guise is absolutely one of the most real work, along with nursing and whatever else. But I digress, sorry. But anyway, Amira is looking after this young girl. One evening they go to the market to get some things, and she's accused of kidnapping this young white child. I should say the child she's looking after is from a white middle-class family, And so this scene ensues in the market where she has to sort of, try to, persuade the security guard and that she is actually, the babysitter. And so what unfolds from there is just this really hugely engaging analysis about class and race. The family that Amira works for, the mum is very much about wanting Amira to be part of the family. And this whole, post-incident description in the novel leads to a link between this woman and Amira. And then drama unfolds from that. It's really cleverly told, very witty, and the Amira and her buddies are just great. It's a real snapshot into young women's culture in States, but just got so many interesting, good things to say. And she says it in a really, really great way. Like, there's nothing, standing on a high horse in this novel at all. She just seamlessly weaves it through their racism, reverse racism, and yeah.
Wow.
Is that very good.
Out yet?
Yeah, it came out in January.
Oh, okay. That's all right then. I was wondering. Yeah. No, it sounds great.
It is. It's good.
Fantastic. Would you like me to go on, or?
Yes, I would, if you've got something more to share.
You have one more, and we are into short stories for me.
Yeah.
And it is Notes from the Fog, stories by Ben Marcus. This edition is the Granter edition. I don't know if it's come out on anything else in Australia. There was a couple of different editions of it though. This is a very interesting little collection of short stories from Ben Marcus, who has released a few other books, very, very experimental novels such as The Flame Alphabet, and name has just escaped me, the other. But definitely they were good books, but were definitely a bit more style over substance. Whereas this collection of short stories, I think he's nailed it, that middle ground between those two things, and an interesting collection of sort of post 9/11, post Iraq War, in the Trump era, America stories. So he's weaving in a lot of very interesting ideas in here. One story where they're designers for monuments to tragedies so that people can feel things again, so they can go to this one museum and get those feelings again. So I believe from memory that they are trying to design a tragedy memorial museum for the World Trade Center attacks. And yeah, it's very confronting, much like the cover with this guy's face pressed right up into the glass. Very dark, very confronting, but ultimately I think a very important collection of short stories that's come out recently. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's hard to describe as well. There's so much in it that's, these stories aren't going to make you laugh. is one way of putting it, I guess.
But make you think.
Yes, quite.
Yeah. Well, I've got just two more novels, both based on true events, but fiction. One is Hurricane Season by Fernanda Melchor, again released by Text here in Australia. And gosh, this book, it's darkly confronting, but an extraordinary read. It's set in Mexico, as I said, based on true events, and it's based around the murder of a local witch or shaman. So it's set in rural Mexico, and she's exploring the pervasive nature of misogyny and machismo and poverty in Mexico in general, and that of course, you know, feeds into the drug cartels and the impact, you know, that has on the, you know, the lives of women, especially in Mexico. This is her third novel. She's only a young writer, but it's the first to be translated into English. And it's told in like a stream of consciousness style, a bit like things like Anna Burns' Milkman, you know, it's just completely told on the page with about three or four different narrators, but yeah, no break. So the detail and stunningness of the writing is just so richly told. So it's sort of like a really sort of unrelenting way of telling the story, but so much is in there and how the narratives link. This was recently shortlisted for the International Booker Prize. Wow. So be interesting to see, you know, I'm not quite sure, I can't remember when that's going to be announced, but yeah, it's I'm so glad to have read it. It's such an important novel. So yeah, that's the hurricane season. Incredible. Yeah. And then one other, which again, I don't have the final copy, but it will cover, but it'll be on the screen again. This is a reading copy of Louise Erdrich's The Night Watchman. And Cade knows that I'm a huge Erdrich fan. And again, her latest novel is based on true events. It's actually based on the story of her grandfather, and it's set in the early 50s on the Chippewa Nation, and it tells the story of the Turtle Mountain Reservation community. And her grandfather was a night watchman, and the character in this book, Thomas Hushk, is also a night watchman, and he's also a senior member of the local tribal council. And in the 50s, which I knew nothing about, I'm ashamed to say, there was a whole push from the federal government in America to emancipate. They called it the Emancipation Bill, which was to move a lot of Native American tribes from reservation lands. And I think that was part of that sort of movement into the cities for a lot of Native American people. And this tells a story about Thomas and the members of the council and the community's effort to fight this bill, which took them from the reservation all the way to Washington to do that. It's also a deeply moving story about rural poverty amongst Native American tribes at that time, and also about the position of women. It's Erdrich always has this amazing thread of humour, black humour, through her writing, and that serves to balance the power and potency of the story, which is, you know, amplified because, you know, it's based on actual events. But yeah, I'd read anything she writes. It was published by Corsair and distributed by Hachette here in Australia.
Oh, that also sounds incredible.
I'm building a little pile for you, as I hope you are for me.
Yeah, you can pretty much take all. I've read all of these, so you can you can borrow them.
And then quickly, just my little collection of international short stories is Sarah Hall's Southern Traveller. Look, I really think Sarah Hall is just one of the best short story writers around. And this, her latest collection, is, again, just beautifully stripped back, gorgeous collection. Again, really focusing on the power of transformation in our lives, and also about how often in our lives we think we're on a journey somewhere and we end up the road taking us somewhere else, and maybe we've ended up living a life that we didn't anticipate we would lead. There's stories, that are deeply elemental. I think I love about her writing is she's so connected to the elemental, and those transformational stories are also like, almost fantastical. So there's a real mix and a lot quite of grounded stories as well in this book, like set in actual England, and but again, just beautifully written. Quite a short collection, but lovely.
Yeah. Oh wow. Well,
so that's me for fiction.
Okay. Yeah, I am all out of fiction, so you certainly chose more than I did, but
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be banging on too much.
That's all right. Get the smelling salts off.
So do you want to do some non-fiction?
Yeah, let's do it. All right.
Okay.
I'll start off, I guess.
Yes, please.
All right. So this is Uncle Hercules and Other Lies by Patrick Lenton, and this is out through Subbed In, which is a small publisher in from out of Sydney. And small disclosure, I do know Dan and their partner who run this little imprint, but it's a very funny collection of personal essays, sort of dealing with queer and queer adjacent issues, and just very, very funny things. One here called "Melbourne is a City, Not a Self-Help Book." I'll just read this line from it. Where is it? Sorry. Let's start this story at the moment where I woke up in my bed in Enmore, surrounded by the scattered remnants of a classic night out, a half-drunk bottle of Powerade with the evocative flavour of Ski Berry Explosion or Canoe Citrus Fever, a packet of Red Rock Deli sea salt chips, because even when I'm drunk, I'm that kind of fancy bitch, and glowing ominously on my laptop, a screen confirming I'd booked a removalist to take all my stupid belongings on a truck from here to Melbourne. This is also prefaced with the subtitle 16 Essays About Almost Nothing, which brings to mind sort of the humour of Seinfeld and things which you may get out of it. But yeah, it's a very fun little collection of essays, and very interesting, coming out of Subbed In. They're putting out a lot of poetry and a lot of smaller books by less represented and marginalized writers and things at the moment, which is great. I'm very proud of them for putting those out.
Thanks for giving them such a good shout out.
Yeah, I would recommend that that everyone should check them out, and if there's any booksellers watching, that you can get their books in to sell too. So
cool.
Yeah, that's that's my wrap for Subbed In.
Fantastic.
And also for Uncle Hercules and Other Lies, of course.
Well, I'm going to give a little wrap to Black Ink Publishers
Yes.
in Melbourne. I think last year when we did this session, Cade, we gave this as one of the books that we were most looking forward to reading.
Yes.
And it hasn't disappointed. This is Salt by Bruce Pascoe, who you will all know from Dark Emu fame. Such a groundbreaking, important book for our country. And also the brilliant Young Dark Emu, which he published this year for younger readers. But Salt is a collection of his selected stories and essays. And if you've not read Bruce Pascoe's fiction before, he's written beautiful children's novels, but his short stories are truly stunning. I'm in a book group with a lovely gang, and one of my buddies there is a high school English teacher. And when she read, we did this for book group, and when she read his fiction, she teaches a lot of short stories and has for many, many years. And she said there's some of the best short stories she's ever read. And his writing, they're very darkly told stories about Australian life, and they're primarily in a rural setting. I think a lot of them are set around Malakuta, where he lives, and but they're brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant. And this collection also contains a lot of his opinion pieces and essays and articles, and in those he is looking at the history of colonisation in this country and the dispossession for Indigenous peoples and the impact of that in an ongoing way. So he's making political comments about, the Uluru Statement, and just so important, so brilliantly written. And also, there's a theme of wonderful dark humour running through these as well.
Yeah, of course. Well, I've got one more non-fiction, and this actually came out in 2018, but I didn't pick it up till last year. And it is Alexander Chee's How to Write an Autobiographical Novel. And it is out through Bloomsbury Publishing. And it's a really interesting collection, sort of going through his life, the realization that he was a gay man, his time doing a fine arts degree at a very prestigious writing college in the United States, time spent as a young man in school in Mexico, where he went for a year as an exchange student. But yeah, it's really, really interesting, and definitely something if unlike the title, you will not learn how to write an autobiographical novel, but you'll certainly get a lot of joy out of this, I think. There's some really great pieces in this one, particularly those pieces about going to the writers' college, and also coming up amongst the socialites in New York at points. Another really interesting piece where he gets an apartment and starts a rose garden and sort of meditates on life via his rose garden, which he's planted. That's a really good little collection of essays too. I know I keep calling them all little, but they're not really. This, I think, is nearly 300 pages, but that's my selection. Yes.
Cool. I'm definitely going to be borrowing from you.
I don't know about that. No. How many of my books do you still have?
I don't think I've got any, actually.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think you gave them all back.
I did. So I'm due for some more, due for a top up.
Don't worry, I'm just being a dick.
I know. Hey, you'll be able to talk with me on this one, Cade. This is a very new collection by Alina Savage called Blueberries, published by Text Publishing. And it's subtitled What Kind of Body Makes a Memoir? And these are probably some of the most original essays I've read in a very, very long time. She's very much writing from the personal perspective in an incredibly deeply honest way. And I know she's spoken about her writing that, you know, you just, if it's not telling the absolute truth, then, you know, what's the point? And she's writing about the body especially, and looking at how that's especially women's bodies, how they are responded to in our society, how that means from living within a female body as well as seeing how it's reflected upon in the male gaze.
It was a fantastic collection, that collection of essays. It was really brilliant. One of the best collections I'd read in a long time. I would have picked it, but you'd already picked it. So.
Well, we picked it together.
Yeah.
Together.
I do like how she played with form in those essays as well. Some pieces are sort of set out almost as if they're poems, and sort of experimenting and changing the way which we consider the novel, I guess. Consider the essays, I mean.
Exactly. Yes. Reinventing the form. Yeah. And then lastly, just two, I guess, more travel oriented books. One is The Lost Pianos of Siberia by Sophie Roberts. And
cool.
this is, I think, Granta. Oh no, sorry, it's Doubleday. Beg my pardon. Look, this is a book that, I just picked up because it intrigued me, Lost Pianos of Siberia, and it was totally intriguing. It basically tells the story of the history of the USSR, really, and the musical influences, especially in the 18th and 19th centuries. It's basically her journeying back through Russia to track down a lot of those influences and remaining pianos, especially in Siberia. So she travels across period from Catherine the Great, who was really the person instrumental for bringing pianos into Russia at that time, and it moves through the Romanov period, through Stalin, up to Glasnost. So it's both historical but also contemporarily told because she's traveling with an interpreter through Russia. But yeah, I just knew nothing about the influence of especially classical music in Russia at that time. And of course, a lot of European composers were going and performing in Russia, and piano, like before, pre-recorded music was available, piano became the center of the home and also the village in so many of those remote parts in Russia. And interestingly, I had to write this down to remind myself, but by 1810, there were 6 Western entrepreneurs who had built workshops in Russia to produce pianos. And there was especially one in a factory in St. Petersburg, and they made over 11,000 pianos before the century was out. And I mean, I just think about, you know, the logistics of transporting pianos
Yeah.
from St. Petersburg to Siberia. And look, it's just truly fascinatingly told and beautifully told. I think it's her first book. Yeah, it's just, you know, just like I said, fascinating historical contemporary perspective, you know, for music lovers and history buffs as well.
Mm.
And lastly, this book, which is not the final cover. The final cover has a beautiful colour illustration, which is stunning. You'll see it at the end of the screens, but it's To the Lake, Balkan Journey of War and Peace by Kapka Kasabova, and it's published by Granta. And people might remember her first book, Border, which came out a couple of years ago and was about the historical significance of that region between Bulgaria and Turkey and Greece. And this is a deeply personal book, To the Lake. It's set in the two beautiful lake region in northern Macedonia, part of former Yugoslavia. And basically, she's in exile, as her mother was in exile and her maternal grandmother was. And so that, you know, depth of sorrow and displacement has been passed down intergenerationally to her. And she and her parents and her sister ended up emigrating to New Zealand at the time of the Balkan Wars and the more recent Balkan Wars. And so what she's doing is going back in search of her family, and the incredible impact culturally of the lakes in that area. It just sounds a really, really stunning part of the world. And I just wanted to read a little bit because there was just a little interesting bit, if I can remind myself of the page number that I thought I'd written down. Oh yeah, here it is. Just a little like historically interesting talking a section about a little lakeside village on the outskirts, of Lake Odrid. And she says that a medieval-looking gate was still attached to the upper gate, and the taxi drove through it. A massive wooden slab panelled in wrought iron and studded with links like chainmail. In the olden days, the upper gate was open only on Mondays, market day. In times of plague, which is why I'm reading this, which is so interesting. In times of plague, the gate would be closed and movement discontinued till further notice. The wealthier Muslim families in the lower town would pack up their households and go to sit out the plague at the houses of Christian friends inside the gates. Meanwhile, at the lower gate by the lake, travellers and returnees from long journeys were stopped and quarantined in two small interlocked churches. And it goes on, but, you know, it just says to me as well so much about how, you know, those incredible, you know, you know, linked religions and the traumas that have been passed down over the world in times like that, you know, they all coexisted. But she's just such a beautiful writer. It's, you know, fascinatingly, every page I'm sort of wanting to sticker something in there. So it's very, very good.
Oh, wow. Awesome. Well, what have you got for us now?
Well, I was just going to quickly mention a couple of crime novels because I know last year we didn't mention any crime books, and I'm not the biggest crime reader, but I do like to read a good crime novel, and there's been a lot of good Australian crime come out the last year that a lot of people have read. Gary Disher, the new Dervla McTiernan's out, and Chris Hammer. But I actually was alerted to a different sort of crime novel by Samantha Irby. I follow her blog, The American Writer, and she had last year given a big plug to this book, Two Girls Down by Louisa Luna. And this and her just out follow-up novel, The Janes, released in Australia by Text. And they're super. They're it's basically the character is Alice Vega, and she is a private investigator, but really she's just a renegade, a total bounty hunter, and just plays completely outside the rule book. And the themes of both these novels are about missing young women. In the first book, Two Girls Down, two young girls goes missing. It's set in rural, a city in rural America, town in rural America, I should say. And she comes to investigate these missing girls because one of the grandmother, sees her on television because she's got such a successful run of finding lost children, and calls her in. And in the process of that, Alice enlists the help of Max Kaplan, who is an ex-cop who resigned from the local force, and you find out why. He's a single dad raising a teenage daughter. And so these books follow the development of their relationship, their connection. And in the second novel, the Janes, they're dealing with the sex trafficking of young women from Mexico into the States. And basically, there is they're dealing with the cops in the novels. So, a little bit of, police procedural in there, but primarily they're operating outside the law, and that way she gets results. And she's a really interesting remote character. And they're fabulous. They're very, once you start, keep going.
I'm going to say I haven't read enough lately, but I do have a soft spot for crime fiction and have done since I was in high school. So
I'm developing more and more of a soft spot up for it.
I did it for Extension English. I think we did crime fiction, but I just haven't kept up to date with it, unfortunately.
Well, I think you'd like these. I'll pass them your way.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And quickly, there's been a lot of fantastic Australian poetry released this year, and I felt a bit conscious about trying to decide between so much of that, but I just urge you to support Australian poets. So I'm going to go left field and just give a quick shout out to this re-released volume, The Black Unicorn by Audre Lorde, published by Penguin Random House. Audre Lorde was a hugely influential African American writer and feminist, and this collection was originally published in 1978, but it's just been re-released, and it deals with the lives of Black women in America, and the political and cultural situations they're living through. And I just feel it's still as relevant and urgent as it was then. And it also contains the collection of the poem Sister Outsider, which became the title of a later collection of her essays and work. But she's a real hero of mine, Audre Lorde, and it's really beautiful, beautiful poetry, important poetry.
Oh, great.
So I'm sorry, I feel like it's just me banging on a bit, but
right.
I know you are usually a huge reader of young adult fiction, but I know you haven't had much time teaching full time.
I've only read one piece this year, and that was the most recent Morrigan Crow novel.
Oh, the Nevermore series.
Nevermore series, I believe that. I think that was last year.
It was, because there was everyone's waiting for the third book in the series.
Yeah, June, I think it is.
June, from Hachette. So great series especially for Harry Potter lovers.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to quickly talk about two Australian YA novels that I don't have here with me. But the first is by Vicky Wakefield, called This Is the Way We Change the Ending. And it was published by Text. And this is another one of her incredibly wonderful realist novels. I just think she is probably the best YA writer we have writing. For me anyway, I really love her. There's brilliant YA writers. You shouldn't say that really, but she is one of the best, absolutely one of the best. And this tells the story of Nate. I think he's about 15, 16 years old, and it's set in a rural country town. And Nate comes from the other side of the tracks, poor family, has an abusive father, and this story really highlights the impact that sort of situation can have on adolescence, and what it exemplifies is the importance of mentoring. Even though he doesn't realize it in the story, the people around him are just having the most incredible impact on him. Nate's really creative. He's hugely into books, and primarily it's a coming of age story. It's about friendship. It's about, taking the time to check in and make sure they're okay, and the possibility that you can change, the sort of blueprint that, is laid out before you with the situation you have. She's just such a gritty, realist writer, and such a great one. So yeah, this is how we changed the ending. It's a ripper. And also by Text last year, they published a debut YA novel by Nina Kenwood called It Sounded Better in My Head. And she's a Melbourne bookseller, worked at Readings. And yeah, look, it's a really beautifully constructed debut novel about a young 17-year-old girl, Natalie, who's doing a HSC, but at the same time her parents are separating, and her two best buddies have just gotten together. She's just really awkward in herself and just doesn't feel like she fits, and everything's falling apart, and everything that she wants to say just never sort of comes out the right way. But it again is a real another coming of age story about finding yourself and finding love, and it's really beautifully put together as well.
Oh, well, both of those sound very good, and they're both on Text, so I assume they're
good. Yeah. And then I'm just going to quickly give a shout out to a couple of picture books. And again, so many picture books to talk about, but a couple of favourites. One is the wonderful Miss Kraken by Nikki Greenberg. Look, I just love a witty, funny children's picture book. I just can't get enough of them, and this is gorgeous. This tells the story.
Nice, Jen.
Pardon?
Put it over your face.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Up a bit, up a bit, up a bit.
Up a bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
There she is.
Yeah.
So Miss Kraken is a new teacher, and her young class are really the only ones that realise that she is quite a large octopus, and no one else seems to be fazed by that, but they're quite bemused by the fact that they have a large octopus for a teacher. And I'll just show you her little list of her little class members there. And they go on an excursion to the aquarium, and she asks them kindly to, she's quite stern, so they're all a bit like, oh gosh, she's so so tough, and she asks them to behave, and of course they don't. They run completely amok, and so then they realise that Miss Kraken's actually missing. And it's a story about you thinking that things are pretty bad, and then you realise, oh no, they could actually get worse, without spoiling the ending. But the thing I love about Nikki Greenberg's illustrations is the looks on the kids' faces. Like, they're just fabulous, like in the classroom when they first see Miss Kraken, like and anyway, I won't spoil it, but it has a gorgeous little twist at the end, and well worth reading for kids and for adults too. And it's published by Allen and Unwin. And lastly but not leastly, there's Landing with Wings, which is just out, and it's the third book by Trace Ballard, again published by Allen and Unwin. And Trace Ballard is the author of River Time and Rock Hopping, and they're stunning books about the Australian bush. And in Landing with Wings, it tells the story of a young girl, again exploring the bush on country north of Melbourne. And Trace Ballard wrote this book in very close consultation with the local Indigenous elders in that part of the world. And the beautiful thing about her book, and I wish I had it here to show you, is how she uses text on the page, like it flows, and she incorporates it into the illustrations, and the detailed illustrations of the Australian bush and its animals are stunning. And again, perfect read aloud material. So yeah, a couple of picture books for adults as well.
Oh, I should probably get some of them for my class. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, don't know if you're the sort of Miss Kraken material that they're talking about.
I am rather stern. Were we just going to talk about the books to look out for? Is that?
Yeah, I think so. We're coming to the end, and yes.
I think we've overshot by quite a while.
Have we? Oh gosh, sorry.
We're going to go for an hour and a half, but that's.
Oh gosh, I'm sorry.
Too interested.
So what do you recommend that's coming?
Here's my cool advanced reading copy.
Oh.
With a full colour cover of Rise and Shine by Patrick Allington. He was listed for the Miles Franklin a few years ago for Figurehead, and this is his new novel, and it is a post-apocalyptic work, and there has been such a glut of post-apocalyptic fiction, but this is honestly doing something incredibly new and very different for that dystopian genre. So it's sort of set in a future where the majority of the world's population has been decimated. So much along the lines of any other post-apocalypse, but in this future, they've discovered that they can feed people on their ability to watch the misery of others. So they're staging a perpetual war with their sister city, so that they can continue feeding their populations with this misery of watching war. Although the wars that they fight have no casualties, they shoot to wound but not to kill. But Patrick Allington has written this book very well. It sort of follows the leader of this city-state, and then other members who are thinking, oh wait, there's a new way to do things, and that's to grow plants. Like it's some crazy idea. And there's certainly that element of, there's almost an element of humor about it too. Like it seems like it's very tongue-in-cheek in parts. And the point going around everywhere is that it's Kafkaesque. And I would say that that's probably hitting the nail on the head with this one. Great write-up from Jane Rawson as well. From the Wreck fame. And Bram Presser, who wrote Book of Dirt a few years ago, gave it a very good review. A very good star rating with review to come. So...
who's it coming from, Cade?
Sorry, that one is coming out through Scribe, and
Scribe, fantastic.
I would thank them as well for sending me out that advanced readers copy.
Yeah.
yeah, certainly at this late stage, it's going to be more than likely one of my books of the year.
Oh, cool. So we'll get to hear about it again next year.
Oh, you might do. I'll probably just be banging on about it for the rest of this year, to be honest.
Well, I have one that you might like, and this is just out, but not the final cover.
Yeah. Oh, man, it looks fantastic.
It's so good. You will so love it. This is Mammoth by Chris Flynn, coming from University of Queensland Press. And this is the incredibly witty and clever story of a 13,000-year-old American mastodon who, along with quite a few other prehistoric skeletons and the hand of an Egyptian mummy, are all gathered together, about to be put up for auction at a Manhattan auction house in 2007. So basically it's a trawling across time story about humans and what we've done, basically. But he tells it in such a clever way, and the repartee between the mammoth and the T-Rex is so good. Yeah, it's so very good.
Sounds crazy and ridiculous, which is exactly how I like my novels.
But saying some very good things,
definitely.
And we're both looking forward to, I know, though I don't know too much about it, the new Robbie Arnott coming from Text
much about it, so.
In June. The Rain Heron. But we both loved Flames so much. So we're holding a lot of hope out for this next book.
Yeah, and if Robbie Arnott's watching, it better be good. Or you'll be savage next year.
No pressure, Robbie. And I know a lot of people will be looking forward to seeing Trent Dalton's second novel coming in June again, called All Our Shimmering Skies. And
same day as Rise and Shine comes out, so pick them both.
Oh, wow. It's a big double header.
Yeah, I think there's something else big coming out that day too. I can't remember though. Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's a third big release. Well, big for my standards release.
And I know there's lots more coming that we haven't put out, but a couple that are out at the moment. There's the internationally, there's the new Emily St. John Mandel, The Glass Hotel, which very keen to read, and Death in Her Hands by Tessa Moshfegh. So there's so many good things are coming, and also just about to come out the new Samantha Irby. Wow. No, thank you. And you know how much I just adore Samantha Irby. She's just one of the funniest people writing. Gosh, she cracks me up. So we've got some good stuff coming, which is really exciting.
Fantastic stuff coming, and some really great Australian fiction, I think, coming out this year as well, which is always nice to see.
Yeah, exactly. And like you will be trawling to see, some of those little gems that, Australian-wise that mightn't get the airplay that they deserve.
Well, I think we better call it quits before
we get kicked off air.
Come around and kick us both. So.
It's been great to chat to you. Thank you so much.
And
thank you. And thank you all for, if you have stayed the distance with us till the end, but thanks for joining in and supporting the Bathurst Writers and Readers Festival. And also we're going to give a shout out for local bookstores everywhere at this time. And in supporting them, you're supporting Australian writers and Australian publishing houses and all the people that work within them. So if any of these books take your fancy, then please try and support a local independent bookstore like BooksPlus to get them from.
Do it.
But Just want to thank the wonderful BMEC staff, Kylie, Sheed and Heidi and Ann for putting it all together.
Of course, always.
And thanks, Cade. It's great to chat to you, buddy.
Thanks to you too, Jen. You're always a great one to talk to about books.
The same.
Not
I
about
look
much
for.
else, you know.
What was that?
Not about much else, but
We'll have to do a drive-by and throw them out the window to each other.
yeah, okay, sounds good. You can have a loaf of my rock hard bread too.
Fabulous.
All right.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
All right.
Bye.